Hello and welcome to the Afghanistan Project podcast. I'm your host, Beth Bailey, and today I am so happy to welcome Mina Sharif. Mina is an Afghan-Canadian writer and advocate whose work centers on amplifying Afghan women's voices and challenging simplified narratives about Afghanistan. She is the founder of Sisters for Sisters, a nationwide mentorship program for Afghan girls, and her debut short story collection, Your War, Our Lives, draws on her 15 years in Kabul to illuminate the resilience and humanity of Afghan daily life. Mina, I've read the book. We were just talking about how much I really liked it and how challenging it is it's really thought-provoking and very important. So I'm so excited to talk about it with you here without giving any spoilers away, because I think everyone should read it.
I appreciate that introduction so much. Thank you. And even just taking the time to read it. Reading is not the easiest thing to do in the climate, that we're in the world that we're in. It's really, I think, asking a lot to say to someone, sit down and read some fictional stories. And that's kind of a little part of why they're short stories, in the hopes that people kind of just like, you take one and then put the book down for a week and take another. But it's not easy, even for me, to just kind of pick up a book and put the time into reading it. So I really appreciate you doing that very much, and the opportunity to sit here and talk to you about it. Thank you.
I'm thrilled. And honestly, I think that, like you said, people can pick up the story, right? But I think that this is the kind of thing where you want to take the time and sit and think with it. Like, I did not read this in one day. I read it over a period of days and thought about, wow, that makes me challenge my thoughts. And am I being this kind of, the stereotype of the ugly American, or that you don't want to do that. And what role have I played in this whole enterprise of war that's been going on and has been impacting Afghan lives in such a more acute way than American lives for the last 20 years? As you say, it's your war, our lives. This is a very good distillation of so much of the impact of that conflict.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. There's no bigger compliment to me than, reflection coming from having read it. So that's the goal more than anything else at all. And title wise, people have asked me about that title too, like who's your, and our lives, but whose war is it? And I think that sometimes people mix that up between like non-Afghan and Afghan, but I really think it's just a matter of people who decided to be involved in this versus those who are just living their lives in a country and really don't have a say, right? So it could be the war can belong to governments, it can belong to armies, it can belong to businesses that profit, it can belong to so many different players, but the people it doesn't belong to is the people who just simply suffer from it, and really nothing else happens to their life except they wait for safety and hope for it.
Yeah, and there are some really good moments to bring out about that too, that I think, you know, uh, you just very complicated things that are worth talking about, that I'll bring up in the future, I promise. But the first thing I want to ask you is, how has the reception of the book been so far?
Well, I am very happy to hear what I'm hearing. It came out only August 1st, so it's very short time into it, and it really helps when people leave reviews, but a lot of times it's just not natural instinct for everybody. The reviews have been great, which is really nice. Um I love when people talk to me about it. I've gotten like emotional messages in my DMs about after people have read stories, like cursing characters, or just being sad or being really happy. And it's what's fascinating to me is how differently different people absorb it and how it feels to different people. It like the same story can be empowering for one person and really sad for another. And like I'm just watching now, so it's really a thrilling part for me. A lot of publishing a book is admin, and I was in that part for so long, like actual publishing. And then now that it's out, we can kind of go back to the stories, and hearing what people are feeling is it's a huge, huge compliment.
For sure. And I imagine that there's got to be a difference, just given the content of some of these stories, between what you're hearing from Westerners, what you're hearing from Afghans in the diaspora, and then what you're hearing from Afghans inside of Afghanistan who've never gotten that opportunity to get out of the country, even if they wanted it. You know, what has that been like? How has that been different?
Um, Um, I don't know if people just aren't telling me what they don't like. I really invite them to. So I don't have a lot of, pushback as of yet, but I sincerely welcome it because I think that's how we grow in our perspectives, in our writing and whatever else. But I can tell you what I've heard so far. In the early days, people are nice, right? So I've heard from the sort of diaspora community or Afghans who have been in Afghanistan and left. I think the reception has been really great because they can connect to the small details that are here that are often lacking in other books. I think because a lot of times those authors, even if they're Afghan, haven't lived there for decades. They're not able to paint a picture of a place. I kind of gave an analogy of sometimes when we read about Afghanistan, it feels like if someone wrote about Canada and it had like in the very first scene a moose and a Tim Hortons and like it's just so forced sometimes. I'm not saying that no book is it feels real out there, but oftentimes. Um, so they're really appreciating that. Like, oh yeah, you caught that detail and you caught that detail, and that's wonderful. From the non-Afghans, so like Westerners who have read it, I think that they've been the most sad and like sort of found the more sadness in these stories. Where what's so funny is Afghans feel more empowered by them, and then Afghans in Afghanistan even more so because they're like, oh, you're just telling our daily life, and this is a book? Like it's almost like they weren't seeing their stories on platforms to that like it's almost throws them off to see such what feels mundane and what feels normal to them in a book. So I think I'd in the best way I could probably phrase that is that they feel seen. That would be the greatest outcome for me for that to be how they feel. But I think it's almost more surprise. Like you're just writing about us. Like there's no big war story and big, political plot. It's just life.
Yeah, and it's just life with, I mean, yes, there's, a big armored vehicle pulling up to, a truck stop basically, or things of that nature, or, people driving for important folks. And, so you're seeing the war in that way. You're not, up close on a bombing. You're not, it's just and so much of war is that way, is the just living while something is going on down the road and you have to keep going. And it's so great. And I'm glad that Afghans feel seen and heard. That's the thing I've struggled with the most in the last 4 years is, so much of what I've written has been filled with Afghan stories, but you have to fit it in a 600-word piece. And
Yeah.
how can you possibly tell someone's full complex story, much
Mhm.
less five people's full complex stories in 600 words? You cannot.
No.
And it has always hurt my heart so much because people pour out their souls about what's happening to them and how they're struggling, and you can't give it the oxygen that it deserves. So these are such important moments that need to be, the voices that need to be heard. Um, and not just, the numbers. I always think it's important too, though, when people come on this podcast and remind viewers that, in this war, yes, there were almost 3,000, I think, American lives lost, but something like 70,000 Afghan lives lost.
Mhm.
And there's so much more than that. There's
Yeah.
lives impacted. And so this is just, it's so important.
Yeah.
Uh, what I would love to start with is you spent 15 years in Afghanistan. When was that in your life? What was it like? And how did that inform the stories that you created? Where are you in these stories? That's a lot of questions. So go on as long as you need to.
Well, I'll give a little more of an answer. So I'm in almost I'm in every story either as someone who observed this really closely. I mean, I'm an observer in this. That's the only way you can write fiction, right? Is as someone who watched or some characters are kind of combinations of me and someone else or feelings that I've had. So I'm in them in every element, right? And as I was telling you before before we started. That's not all only the positive characters. There's a lot of me calling myself out and lessons I learned along the way, and what I hope not to see, and sharing that by just showing you. And in how I see it now, I'm like, oh, that's how I was coming off, So, and some of it's like and I'm not even mad about all of it, if that makes sense. Like, it's just we all have our learning process as we become closer connected to a country that we did not grow up in. So, particularly for us, yourself, me, others who didn't grow up there, we're going to have a process in our connection to Afghanistan. You cannot walk in there and just know things. You can't have a 2-week holiday and know things. 15 years won't even give you I think the authority to say this is what Afghanistan is like. So this is a collection of like what I saw, what I experienced, and not an explanation of Afghanistan. So going back to how I actually ended up there was initially there was a group called Impacts that did women's radio station media training. So women managed radio stations throughout the country. We would do training for them. It was a 6-month volunteer position. And I emphasize volunteer because that made it only allowed to happen for 6 months. They couldn't keep you longer. And so, of course, that 6 months ends, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm just starting to get attached here. I'm just starting to, you cannot possibly understand anything in less than 6 months. And I mean, to see people writing books and creating movies 3 months in is appalling because there's so many nuances to just even if you have the same day over and over and over, there's so much to absorb. And so that 6 months turned into a year because I signed a contract with another small NGO, and then I ended up just really not wanting to come back. So that turned into 15 years. It really is, to me, where I grew into adulthood. My childhood was in Canada. My adulthood, like I grew into my adult years in Afghanistan, and now I'm in whatever the third part is.
So then you went, how old were you when you went there
I was
first?
no, I was in my early 20s. I was
Okay.
24 when I
Okay.
first so
Wow. And you just stayed on, and what other NGOs did you work with after Impact?
so after Impacts, I worked with a small Afghan-led organization. I don't even put that one on my CV, to be honest. It was a terrible experience. Then there was a lot of Afghan-owned media organizations. So these are the organizations that are doing sort of the contract work that's out there that's oftentimes done by foreign organizations, but sometimes they awarded it to an Afghan-owned or an Afghan-led organization. A lot of times it's a French one who's leading the media campaign, but there were Afghan ones too, and I've worked with a few of those. I worked with Moby, which is Tolo TV, and produced Sesame Street for a couple of seasons. Then I went back to the NGO world, and I produced a children's program where I worked with the Afghan Scouts, um, and we did programs that were filmed in almost all the provinces. I mean, I think we did at least 14 provinces. It's not all of the provinces, but a good taste of most of Afghanistan. When I was working with women and children, I think is where I couldn't I couldn't bring myself to be involved in. I really I think I looked away. This is if I say I have a regret from my time in Afghanistan, that's one of them. I think I thought looking away from what I didn't approve of or didn't like, and just kind of judging it from where I was, like, you guys are gross. You're just in that gross little corrupt little money scheme stuff, and I'm not. And I think I've learned in hindsight that deciding that you're not isn't an option. Like, you're in it. It's affecting everyone, and just looking the other way is a lot of why we're here. So many people look the other way within the government, within powerful positions, even within a position that I was in. I could have said more. I could have been vocal rather than just judgmental, And I don't think everyone was corrupt, but I mean, just deciding that I would avoid it is probably it was blissful for me, but it also was I don't think the most mature way.
I mean, that it was so endemic though, right? So if there's, I understand exactly why you would choose that, but then of course it's like maybe I could have made some kind of wave that could have eventually done. That's a hard one. There are so many.
More proud of myself, if I had been like, I think I just really thought, well, that's not me. I don't do that. This is what I do instead. I stayed in really, really small organizations. I worked in a lot of grassroots level work at all times. It's what I enjoyed. And so a lot of times it intersected with the government and and donors and all of that. Like nothing happened in Afghanistan without that like crossing. But I'd cross it, I'd have this meeting with someone at this municipality or this whatever, and I'd be like, ugh, this is not me. This is you guys. Bye. I'm going back to the kids. And that was really, I don't know, it wasn't the most mature take, I don't think. And if I could do it again, I would take a more active role. But you're right. Like at the time, it's hard to think that way. But as I've been asked, what would you do different? That's definitely it.
Sure. And I think that's such an important thing to do now is look back and say, what could have been different? What could we have done
For
better?
each
And
of us. For
corruption is
each.
just
Yeah.
like, that's the one thing that comes up all the time when people are talking about who will lead Afghanistan next. It's like any of the corrupt old leaders can't come back. They cannot because they've shown who they are and there needs to be someone else. Like every young Afghan that I speak to says that no more of this. And so, you know, it's just one of many things that is a regrettable thing. And who knows, maybe I don't know, there were so many efforts to relieve corruption.
There were, and I think also too, just speaking in these big, broad brushstrokes about everyone was corrupt and everyone was as irresponsible as looking the other way. I mean, responsibility is a very heavy position to put yourself in, and that means like seeing the good and the bad in every corner, seeing your own responsibility when you were quiet when you shouldn't have been, when so there's a lot of responsibility I think is on all of us. And where the only place I have really seen or I really feel strongly about it being an exception is really the average Afghan citizen. Like in all of that, the person who is suffering the most from these decisions, the person who is going to be affected whether we're there or not, those are the ones who really didn't have the option to make those choices like um, be vocal, don't be vocal, be corrupt, don't be corrupt. Like they're the ones who took the brunt of whatever decision was made. Again, going back to the title, it's that. It's like your war, you people who did things, good, bad, whatever, and us who just had to go with the flow of however that turned out.
Yeah. And I mean, there was very little, if you look at every time that we negotiated with the Taliban, the Afghan government was left out. And, how dare we that anyway, it's how there are so many ways that Afghans were just completely sidelined and
A lot
left to
were
deal with the consequences
a
of
lot
all
were
of that.
complicit in making in putting us in that situation too. So, right? It's
There is
individual.
a yeah, there's so much blame to go around. It's silly to simplify, and every time somebody tries to simplify, I'm like, "But then wait," because I always like to bring up the counterinsurgency spaghetti, if you've ever seen it. It's if you just search counterinsurgency spaghetti in Google Images, you'll see someone put together this whole graphic of all the things that feed into each other in Afghanistan and why counterinsurgency was so difficult is because it's a complex society just like any society, and if you're going to make change you have to engage all these different things at once. It's a nearly impossible thing. You can't simplify it, you just can't. And so we don't need to belabor it, but you're right, there is no simple answer, there is no broad brush, well, this was the problem. There were lots of issues and they all played into each other, and some people were doing the right things and some people were not. And yeah, I say let's talk about the book, because that's something we can kind of wrap our heads around. And like I said, I don't want to ruin anything for people because I really want them to get the experience of reading the stories for themselves. But one of the things that's kind of implied throughout these stories is the what an Afghan life was worth versus what American lives were worth. And did you see that up close and personal when you were inside of Afghanistan? And if so, how did you see it?
Oh yeah. I mean, the way we protected non-Afghan lives, non-Afghan lives sounds so weird, but people who were not local were protected, we were cared for, they were prioritized in every workplace that I worked. And it wasn't even always the fault of the workplace. This was just standard. You had to this person's life just there's no other way to say it. It had more value, right? It was more important that this person be safe. It was more important that this person be in the safer car. And I think it was under the guise sometimes that, like, oh, because they're at higher risk of being kidnapped or they're, but there came a point when that was no longer necessarily true, and really Afghans were being put at the exact same level of danger, and that was not ever really considered. Like, okay, you're right. It is very dangerous for this person to drive on that road, but it's also super dangerous for the Afghan car that you're sending behind to be on that road. But the Afghans are in the Corolla and the important guys are in this big armored truck. Like, it was a fact. You're working in the same office, and the more important staff is coming through these big, huge gates in these big armored vehicles. And oh my God, let's make sure there's nothing under the vehicle and check under it and zoom right in. And the local staff at the same place where this car is being zoomed in are standing and knocking and waiting for whenever somebody might open the door for them as they're standing on foot on that same high risk street and that same high risk spot. So it is what it is. Like, I'm not pointing a direct finger at any specific person. It had become the culture where foreign life was treated especially in the professional space, as far more valuable than Afghan lives.
Yeah, and I think that that's something per all the reading that I have done that happens in conflict zones where you have
Yep.
Westerners coming in is that dynamic does take place. But this is 20 years of that dynamic in a country. And what impact does that have on Afghans? Do you think that they start to see themselves as less than, or do you think that they maybe then begin to resent the people who are being put above them?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that Afghans start to feel less than. No, nobody can make us feel less than. So, I mean, what happened though is I really saw a shift in the idealization of foreigners in the time that I was there. Not from everybody. Again, I can't speak for anything except what I saw in a very general way, where initially I just saw like really romanticized ideas of what a foreigner meant in any space. Like, oh, they were the most exciting guests to have at a wedding, or the most, like, it's so important that we're friends with them. And it really started to shift a little bit later to a little bit more of like, well, are they one of the good ones or not? Are they one of the ones that are because we don't want to be around. I was kind of in between worlds. Like, I've heard conversations on both sides. So I think that's where I saw the shift happen, where it was a little bit more, the standard was raised as far as which foreigners. And don't get me wrong, there were so many good people. I'm so careful about making sure um that I say that voluntarily, because at the same time, if I don't say it, people reveal themselves, because the people who are like, but not all foreigners were like this, like, you're just revealing, like, if you were the exception, chill, because obviously there were exceptions. If when I say the Afghan the Afghan expats, or however you want to phrase the diaspora that went back, were predominantly there for money. A lot of them treated Afghans really badly. Yeah, I will say, I'll use the word majority. That puts me in it. It's okay to say something in a general way and not always, pander to feelings. There were so many good foreigners, so many good Afghans who came back, but we did have a problem with how Afghans locally were treated by those two groups. Fact.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's why it's great that you said you're in all these stories because there are, the diaspora,
Yeah.
the very like
Diaspora.
new diaspora. And I wondered that when I was reading it. I was like, I wonder if this has any, there's a great story in there that um it shows the connection of family, even if, diaspora to always stayed inside Afghanistan. And I loved that, the fierceness of that protection when the girl,
Yeah.
she's at first she's like kind of like embarrassed, I think, and just like, oh my gosh, why are you
Yeah.
acting this way? This westernized girl who's come to visit, but then she protects her, and it's a beautiful reminder that they're still connected and they still are. Anyway, there's it, that diaspora dynamic has always been so I don't think I really understood it until the country fell.
At least in this moment, I think unity would really serve all of our communities together. And once we are free enough, I mean, a month into being free, let's start to have these hash out these conversations about who's been in charge too long, who needs to be put in positions of leadership to change things. I believe in equality as something that we haven't had, and I'd love to see it. But I first need for us to be free enough to try to map that out. So it was a tangent, but that is kind of where I feel on diaspora. I don't know if that helped.
Yeah, no, it was helpful. And you mentioned ethnicity, which is the other big thing where I've had people come on here and go on tangents about other ethnicities. I'm like, oh no. Oh no, 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 we can't do that. Like, no.
That's a lot of the hurt, and a lot of it is it's
It's
very honestly
it's rooted
valid.
in
Yeah,
horrors. Of course, I
yeah.
understand it. It's centuries of pain, right? This was a
Mhm.
country that was created with so many ethnicities. I don't think it was the boundaries, I don't think were created to make a cohesive country, right? But now what do you do with it? Do you come together, especially right now because there is a common enemy, right? So it's like, can we just for now, just get rid of the common enemy and then figure out, how do we make sure that different ethnicities have representation?
Exactly. Like
And
right
that,
now,
yeah.
can we get equal rights for all and go? But that's hard to feel when you have a very deep rooted decision made that it is all because of. If you're going to sit in
Yeah.
that energy, then that's not solution oriented,
Girl.
and no one can talk you into it.
Thank you. Yes. But that's a very hard, like you said, it's been a very hard struggle for Afghans for so long. And so
Yeah.
how do you push past that? And I don't know. So let's talk about some of the themes of these stories. There's an orphanage where someone they need help. They need real help, and someone comes in with things instead that are not needed, that don't help anyone, and yet there's like this gratitude, right? Because you can't be ungrateful. How many times did you see things like that happen in
All the
Afghanistan?
time. And again, I have personally handed out stuffed animals at an orphanage myself. And that's another thing with spending more time, right? Like a quick visit will have you in that headspace of kids love stuffed animals. I'll give it. It's not wrong to think that. It's a matter of spending more time understanding your surroundings on a deeper level that will tell you that, that is you're doing such surface level support, and you're really even within games and toys, like how many times have you asked kids what they do have versus what they don't have and want, so but that I think would translate even further than the orphanage scene that's in the book. Like a lot of times I would see reports on projects that were happening in Afghanistan, and the reports would come back and say the village was super happy and they absolutely love the program, 10 out of 10. And I would just be like, but are you guys critically thinking about who you're asking, how you're asking them? Because to ask a group of people who are, and this is not to touch on their pride and their character, but they're desperate because they're poor, not because of anything else, because they don't have the economic means. You're asking a group of people who don't have any economic means for anything, um, after you've given them like flour and food and some money even to attend a course, what do you think they're going to say about how they felt about the course? And they might say to you, they're not even going to give you feedback. They're not going to tell you the truth, which is oftentimes like, hey, that bag of flour you bought, I could have got you 3 times the amount for the price you paid. I could have got it fresher without like little worms in it. Or I could have they're not going to offer that because in this state of desperation that they're in, that is not the mindset to be then saying like, so give me a rating 1 to 10. They want you back. They want more help. They want that to continue. They need it. So it's that you're not getting the answers I don't think people were looking for the answers. They were just looking for validation of like a thank you. A thank you was enough for people, I think, to feel like they did something amazing for Afghanistan. But that thank you comes from a different place. It comes from, you know, thank you for this, yes. And it's never going to come with, but it's just not going to come with it.
Yeah, I
You
can
won't
think of
call them
so
grateful.
many. Right. So many things, so many times that like provincial reconstruction teams went in and were like, we did this and this and this. And it's like, yeah, but the slapdash school you put together, like the Taliban burned it down a month later. And, this that you did like wasn't actually needed here, but, or the other argument. So you go and you do the survey and the town says, oh, yes, we like this. Guess what happens? The Taliban goes and does the same survey and they get totally different responses because you know what else the Taliban has? The ability to kill people or
Right.
otherwise make their lives difficult. And so they're going to answer them a different way. And when you have two surveys that say entirely the different stories, it's like, what's the true story? And you don't know because there's so much, we need help. We need to not die.
Well, yeah,
Where's
it's not. People are underestimating the effect of survival instinct. Survival instinct is not like, hey, here's a cup of tea, let's have a little survey, and I'll know everything accurately from you. It depends who's sitting in front of you, and it depends on your own circumstances. We're coming down to just those were meaningless assessments. And they had to be unless they were done properly, which they were sometimes
Mhm.
community led feedback. Anyway, we're going on research and methodology tangents now. So but it was really, really oversimplified. The the looking into what we were doing and how people were receiving it.
For sure. And I wish it had been done differently so that we could have made an impact that was needed, or that there could have been a mechanism for saying, here's where the greatest need is and here's what's going on. But,
Oh, well, to
maybe.
be fair, a lot of people were yelling it out. Like a lot of Afghans
Yeah.
were creating, like there were Afghan-owned organizations too who were like this, guys, this,
Yeah.
and security-wise, this. But it's a matter of falling on deaf ears. So, uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I and that's a problem too, where it's, there were these things, commanders emergency response funds where we would just give money to soldiers on the ground and they would, or usually officers, and they just dole it out like, here, you need this for this, whatever. And like, why was it that way? Why would it not be, I need money for this, can you give it to me, instead of just like, here's $100 for what, anyway.
We'll have that turn
We
out.
could, it's so fun. I would love, can the CERT people come find me? Like I would really just like $100 for just, I don't know, existing. But there's another story, and this, we kind of talked about this earlier. There are two characters who are friends, but one of them is Western, one of them is Afghan, and the family is kind of giving her grief about her American friend and how they treated her like a queen when she came to the house, but there's like this huge gulf between them.
Mhm.
And what is that? I mean, that I can just imagine it in reality. How can you be friends through this giant divide? Did you ever experience that?
Yeah, I think I've been on all sides of that too. Like where I'm not understanding the disconnect. Like, what do you mean? This is a great person. Or other times I've been sort of on the other side of it, being like, what are you doing? Don't do that. It just complicates things. Let's like I'm gonna go and I'm the most foreign person that in the room. Like, and no, if I just don't speak, no one knows anything. We're good. We're safe. I'll just not talk. And then they'll be like, oh yeah, but I brought my friend Emily. She's coming, and I'm like, what are you doing? So I've been on both sides of it. Like security wise is a great example of how it can feel to have foreign friends within an Afghan context. Security is a great like way to show that it can just feel so different for different people. Like they all love a good friend. An Afghan family is going to invite a good friend over and treat them wonderfully. Why it's different for one person is because, hey, what does that mean? This visit mean for the safety of my family? That's the lens one person is seeing it from. And then this other person is just like, she's such a wonderful friend. I want her to have the best time when she comes over because we're Afghan and we're hospitable and I love her. And so that's just in a lot of different worlds, you're going to have different people reacting to someone in different ways. But in Afghanistan, it's because there's such heavy layers of responsibility on certain family members, or maybe even the boss of a company doesn't want to hire this person because that's going to make things stressful security wise or whatever else. So yeah, there's those layers that people ignore that have nothing to do with the individual. It's just about what does this mean if we what does it mean for our family to allow this kind of working at an American organization, having American friends, or not Western in general?
Sure. Sure. Yeah. There's another instance in here that was really interesting to me just because of all the conversating that I have done with like SIV applicants who had to prove, that they're not in any way affiliated with the Taliban. And there's the young woman who says, oh, I don't feel safe when she finds out that the driver had driven for the Taliban during their prior regime. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, I would have also been like, no, thank you. That's a no for me. But as they say, how were they supposed to work? What if that's your only way of working? And in fact, we have a workaround too for people who had to work with the Taliban, who were forced to work with the Taliban after the country fell. If they had some kind of thing, there was like a workaround in the SIV program, I think, for that. Because what if they forced you to, and you're in this impossible situation. And so that was really unique to me. It made me think a lot. And I wonder, how often do you think that that has been a problem for
Uh,
Afghans?
I don't know. I think probably not a lot in depending um on the position that they're
Mhm.
working in, right? Like if you're I've met former like high ranking Taliban, and I was literally nervous, and I was there with a friend who was doing a story, and that's one thing. And then I had the exact thing I wrote about is actually based on my own experience, where a driver at one of the organizations I work with, like very casually mentioned that he was a Taliban before, and I was like, "Oh, you were?" Like, yes, that was me. Um, so I was like, and in that instant, it was very early in my time in my defense, but in that instance, I had to reconcile that. Oh, well, before that was all anyone could do. Like that was how you made a living before. And that actually really helped me evolve my view of the Taliban themselves. Like how many of these guys are just they were like 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds that were thrown into a madrasa and told like your family will get wheat and oil and basic food, and we'll take care of you, and you're going to be so pious, it's going to be great, bye. And that's how they were raised, with everyone thinking that this is such a great thing initially, and here we are, right? Like there was a lot of people that were doing what they had to do, and not with this intention of like, I'm going to do this even though it means that so many people are going to suffer. No, it was literally just, okay, this is a way that I can survive. This is a way that people can in my family can eat. And that just really kind of took a weight off of me personally, and in how I saw the interaction with Taliban or with whatever group, and really took my focus higher up to the leadership who actually make this happen, who devise these kind of circumstances for Afghans.
Yep, and they're the same ones who were there during the prior regime for the
Uh-huh.
most part, and they're the same ones who led all of the terror orchestration for 20 years, and they're back. And all of the fodder, that's basically what those people that they had in the madrasas, they've all just been fodder for the last
Exactly.
25 years, and it's just despicable and disgusting, and unfortunately, most of them are now avowed, supporters of that movement, and they're I don't know.
Yeah. There comes a
It's
moment though where you have to think like, okay, I'm angry at the cult um from its leadership specifically, and not at like the babies who are in the cult and the women who are in the cult and the, like we can differentiate like that, but somehow with Taliban it's just because we have a visual of them in our mind and we're like they all have made this decision to hurt people. I don't know that they have. That's not how I always see it. I see it really as um a parallel to a cult. I mean, I don't see it as different from a cult. It is the same
yeah.
thing. They've been really brainwashed into, or that's what's been ingrained in their mind whilst they were surviving. So I don't know how it wouldn't be very easy for them to think any other way.
Yeah, I think that's true. I feel for the women too. I know that there's been a lot of attacks on Taliban wives lately, but to me, I've seen a lot of women forcibly married by the Taliban,
Uh-huh,
so
uh-huh.
I would not assume that most of them were like, "Yes, I would really like to marry
No, sure
this
they got
senior
romance.
Taliban leader." Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think it's really yeah, I think I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about all of that, but there I have one more question I want to ask you about the book, and then I want to hear about Sisters for Sisters. So the last thing is there's this really compelling story about a young man who's been studying in the US and comes back to Afghanistan, and it's almost like he's homesick. So he's homesick for Afghanistan when he's in the US, and he's homesick for the US almost, even though it's not, I wouldn't call it homesick, but he misses the things that he remembers from there when he is in Afghanistan. And so did you ever experience that yourself? Is that kind
Yeah,
of
that's my life story. I
yeah.
have being from 2 different worlds that will happen. A lot of times when I was in Afghanistan, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I am like the most Canadian human alive." I miss everything about it and just feeling so I suppose like you just feel so separate from what's around you in any given moment, not like all day every day, but it'll be little things that happen and you're like, "I feel so disconnected from where I am right now." And then I would come back to Canada and be like, "Oh my god, I'm not like anyone here, and I miss Kabul so much." And I used to miss Kabul while I was still at the airport. It was such a traumatic relationship I had, and still have with living in Afghanistan. But the feeling is one thing, like having the two different homes and missing one versus the other. But also too, you don't have to spend a lot of time outside of Afghanistan to become now labeled as different than people who haven't left. Like, so you can go away for school and come back, and you have shifted identity wise a certain amount. You have shifted, I think, in to what description you fall. There was some scenes I cut out of that story that had these security guys arrive at the house with the friend and they make comments to him, about like the gel in his hair and the jeans he's wearing. And he's like, not hasn't really even picked up on the nuances of how obvious it is that he looks different now. Because I mean, Afghans wear jeans, Afghans wear jeans, but there's something slight in the way you wear it, in the way you just look like you just, even in the States. Like I'm sure if someone from Texas is visiting LA, there's just like something where you're like, you're not from around here. And it's not from speaking necessarily or from, a deep conversation. There's just something in the appearance, something in the way someone walks. Like, it just feels like you're not 100% exactly like everyone around you anymore.
For sure. Yeah. And everything that I said too before about the the issues between diaspora and non-diaspora Afghans and ethnic groups, like those can all be said of Americans too,
Oh,
100% of the time. So I wanted to make it clear, like, this is a human thing. This is it, but it's just that Afghans have that extra the trauma that they've been through, the things that people have stuck around for because they love the country so much and they've put up with all of it because they love it so much. And,
Absolutely. That all
you
comes
know,
from love and from hurt. For specifically from hurt, I think right now because in and I'll say this about diaspora specifically because they get blamed a lot for the hate that they when they do perpetrate a lot of the rhetoric, but like it is who they've lost in a way that's so different than people understand. So they're not ever validated for that loss. Everyone understands when people lose their lives, have war, but nobody understands the loss of identity. They don't really acknowledge it. And that's so deep rooted. So I think it comes out in a more lash out kind of way than we'd expect. It's
yeah.
horrible.
Yeah. I think that you've told so many stories really beautifully in this, and I hope people will pick up a copy. And before we close out, I want to ask you about Sisters for Sisters. When did you start that initiative? And tell me what what is the goal and what's the day-to-day of that like?
Okay, well, I'm not actively with Sisters for Sisters right now, but I am the founder of the initiative, and I'll tell you the origin story. We can end on that. And it was a really fun one. We were having a Nowruz party for the orphan kids. Somebody had donated live music, so like someone will pay a musician, and then so the kids had new clothes. They were really little kids, so no one was over like 11 or 12 at the very oldest, so really little ones. Um, and It was a joy. We had brought them food. We were outdoors, but in somewhere gated. It was nothing loud. It was the middle of the day. It was just something cute, a nice lunch for them. And the boys had gone off to play sports sort of off in that side of the field, and the girls were enjoying the music and dancing to it. Little girls, right? Enjoying and dancing and having I have little video snippets of this I'll send you because you're gonna like it. And then in the middle of the song's not even done yet, the boys' game finished, and I just watched as the girls went, not even a sad look on their face, no conversation, just instinctively went and sat down because the boys came dancing in. Like they were like, "Oh, music, time to dance." And they got the stage. They got the dance floor 100% to themselves. And it was just one of those like kind of moments for me where I wasn't upset at the boys because they didn't say like, "Get out of the way, it's my turn." What bothered me was the instinctiveness of it, how naturally it happened, how there was no conversation. There was just like, well, the boys are here, so it's time for us to what else would we do but move? And that it just hurt me. I thought like, wait, why? So I made the boys get off the dance floor and said, you can come on the next song. And I made all the girls get back up and finish having their song. And I wanted them to stay for a couple more. And they kind of weren't confused. They're so little. So they're not making conscious decisions like, I'm not, worth this, or it's not there yet. These are very formative years where what you do on a daily basis forms how you're going to be as an adult. And that's why I created this. It was initially like 16 girls, the same girls that were there, a little bit older than them, are the girls that we put in our program. But from that day, similar group, um, it was like 16 girls, and we just wanted to do a little bit of mentorship, not like telling them how to be, just showing them options of things they could aspire to be, instilling confidence. They had women from politics come and visit them. We had a women restaurateur come and visit them. I had a homemaker come visit them because it's not a matter of you should aspire to be only something that has a big name attached. You but aspire to love yourself and to be confident. That was the whole goal. So they ended up wanting to do sports. They learned to ride bikes. Whatever made them feel just more secure in themselves is it's all I wanted. And it grew to well over, I think, 200 girls eventually, young women as well. And then we started Brothers for Brothers, because boys need it in a different way, but they need to love themselves and be really connected to who they are as well. It's a beautiful program. I had a ball doing that. But that's the origin story, the dance party.
I love that. I think Self-love keeps you from being self-hating, which is where a lot of the woes, I think, of the world come from. So
Mhm.
I think that's just beautiful, and that you saw that and found a way that maybe you could give that confidence and that,
Some of those
no, we
girls
can keep.
are in the States right now studying in
Oh,
university.
wow.
It was
Wow.
so yeah,
That's
with scholarships, not even just like yeah, they got
I'm
their
not even surprised. Afghan women are brilliant and hardworking. I've this is something that has bothered me so much, is that I think that the Western image of Afghan women is a woman in a blue burqa, right? And this like bird-like creature that you can't see, or it's just, as you put in the book, the National Geographic cover, which is of course a beautiful and stunning picture that moves so many people, but Afghan women are some of the most on fire for learning, on fire for social change, uh, indomitable people out there. And we just don't get to see that because there isn't the space in the media for them. They don't get to tell their whole stories, all of these things that have to change. And so I love that. I'm glad that that is part of your work, is even if it's not through being actively in Sisters for Sisters right now, but just you know, amplifying Afghan women's voices, as your bio points out. It
Afghan
is,
amplify.
I think that that's a you have the idea first and then you bring it into action by small steps all the time. Because it's just unconscionable to me that the West, I was just writing this because I'm trying to turn the last 4 years into a book on my own. And I was writing about the March 2022 when the Taliban said, "Oh yeah, girls can go back to secondary school." And then at 9 a.m. on that day said, "Nope." And I remember it. And I remembered thinking the world is going to catch on fire. They don't know what they have awoken here. And it was just like nothing. It was a big nothing burger. All the big, Amnesty International and groups like that certainly raised their voices. But the rest of the world was like, meh, whatever. Ukraine just happened, all the things are going on. It's like, you just took the hope away from millions of girls, and the world is silent. And they just keep taking more and more away, and the world is silent. And I don't know how to make the world wake up, but I don't know. I guess that'll be my last question for you. I thought that the last question was Sisters for Sisters, but now, Mina, the last question is how do we wake the world up about what's happening to Afghan women and girls?
Oh God. Well,
It's a really small question, very easy to answer.
I yeah, well, no, that's it. So the thing about the world waking up is I don't even know that that needs to be or should be our priority because at the end of the day, people are naturally inclined to be in some version of survival mode for themselves. Very few people want are like you who are sitting in one part of the world and caring about another part of the world so deeply, right? Uh, so the attention from everyone is one thing, but the actual change, the actual people who there's very small groups of people who are making this happen, who are, this happens from a group of like 10%, like this little, let's say 10 if I had little matchsticks, I would say like 10 matchsticks are doing everything and the rest are everybody else. So focusing on getting everyone else to care is great, but it's still not going to change anything. We need to refocus on like how this is happening, who's doing it, and how we as voters, as taxpayers, can, respond accordingly. A politician's never going to change what they're doing unless it means it's going to cost them votes and power. So I think if I could ask anyone to be an ally for Afghanistan, when I'm asked, I say like, okay, do it within your scope. You know, uh, when you protest, don't just say Afghan women are protesting. Isn't that amazing? Because the fatigue is there. No one, it's not resonating. But there was a school in like this tiny little town in Canada where the girls held up signs and protested on behalf of girls in Afghanistan from their own voice, from their own space, from their own school, and it was in the papers and it was out, and I thought like that was so beautiful. It really stuck with me because we think we're amplifying voices, but amplifying voices really means give them the platform and move away and let them say it, right? So in changing things, what we need to do is less of repeating what Afghan like, do you get what I mean? So less of the you need to listen to them and more of like, hey, I don't stand for this and I am your um I'm your voting population. I am your taxpayer. And from that stance, I think we have a better chance of potentially changing things. But hearts and minds only go so far. We are at a crossroads though where people have not a lot of space to care about a lot of different
Yeah,
things.
there's so much going on. And so
Yeah,
it's just like there's, 17 crises.
there
How can
is.
you, and like that's been the whole progression is like, Afghanistan was garnering so much media attention until Ukraine. And then you had October
Yeah,
7th.
we
And then
time
you
back.
had just, it's like, it's just been an onslaught. And then, Iran. And there's a lot of
Yes.
bad in the world right now. But I
Yeah.
just can't let Afghan women feel like they're being not heard. That is to me, especially as they're losing that one thing, internet access. I did hear that Bulk got internet back though. So by the time that this airs, I guess we'll find out if that's for real or not, because
Yeah.
who knows. But losing that one avenue they had to connect with the world, it was cruel.
I think, yeah, a lot of the things I said about like the caring about Afghanistan are in more general. When it comes to women, the topic of women's rights, I think people need to realize there is no disconnect. When women's rights start to just crumble in what that's just ground zero. If anything, that it will travel and it will travel like a disease. It will travel fast, and we will all either protect our rights together or lose our rights together. And that really needs to start resonating
Yep.
with women.
Yep. So I had Heather Barr on, oh gosh, it's probably been a year and a half or 2 years ago now, and from Human Rights Watch, and she said the same thing. And it was like that has stuck with me in such a huge way that this isn't just a problem for Afghan women. Other leaders will see it, other leaders will start to emulate because they see there's no consequence for the
Yeah,
Taliban. And so why not?
too, right? Like it's not just like, oh, a couple of little Afghans that we don't care about are just going to die. Well, no, but they're also training attackers on that land. And who do you think they're going to attack themselves? They just the logic is really lost on people right now about what it means for them. If you're going to sit back and wait to see what it means for
Yep.
you, I think that's the worst decision.
Oh, it's so sickening. I mean, literally, last week, Tajmir Jawad, who was head of the Kabul attack network that did all the suicide bombings in that area between 2015 and 2020, he was head of that in those years. He came out and said, "You want Bagram? Like, we're going to start using suicide bombers to protect ourselves." They've said since like literally the first months of coming back into power that they were training suicide bombers.
It
And the
shows
world,
us,
it's like,
you know?
it's like they just went like this, la la la. It's like, bro, do you realize who these people are? They haven't changed at all. They are unchanged. They're avowed terrorists, and we just have our eyes off the ball. And Afghan women are suffering. Our allies who put their lives on the line are still dying in reprisal killings, and no one is doing anything about it. We're just shipping more people back from Iran and Pakistan. We aren't. Iran and Pakistan are. But it's unconscionable the number of terrible things happening inside
Yeah, at
Afghanistan right
once. And
now.
it's even as someone who wants to support Afghanistan, it's hard to keep up with all of it, right? Like how many different problems and how many different like dire situations there are. So you take all of that and then you think about the earthquake and
Yeah.
even, so it is a
And
lot for anyone. So to ask someone
yeah.
completely unrelated to the subject, and it's hard to say, care about this. But if you want to look at it more clearly, care about yourself. Your security is at risk because of this situation in Afghanistan. Your rights as a woman are at risk
Yeah.
because this is what the world is accepting in Afghanistan. So if we simplify it, I think to those two things, it might resonate.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly going to try. So I'll be with
Okay.
you
You're doing a
fighting the
great
good fight. And I just want to thank everybody. Thank you for coming on, Mina, and
Oh,
talking.
thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure. I've watched and I feel like I said, I feel in the beginning, I feel like I know you already, but it's It's nice to officially know you.
We'll just have to get together sometime. I was thinking we need to just have like a giant gathering of everyone who cares about
That'd be
this to just
so weird.
to give each
Everyone
other,
goes
oh, it would
this.
be. And like to give each other a hug, like in reality. It would just be so nice. I would love to do that at some point. So
Yeah.
it's been so great to have you. Everyone should read Your War, Our Lives. And I want to thank everybody for listening, for caring about the people of Afghanistan. And for now, Tasha Kaur, and hope to see you later.
Thank you so much. Oh, and just a note, if anyone
Yeah.
wants to get the book, I forgot. I'll pin a link. I'll pin a
Yeah.
link
Oh, I
there.
will put everything in the show notes.
Okay.
So if anybody wants it, look in the show notes. You'll find, if there's an Amazon link, whatever you send me, Mina, I will put into the show notes so people can
Thank
find it and
thank
get to
you.
it easily. All right. Tasha
Thanks.
Kaur, hope to see you soon.
Love this.